Every 2 years, the golf world lights up with the Ryder Cup. It makes for an excellent trading tournament, but it trades very differently from other traditional golf tournaments. So if you're interested in learning how to trade the Ryder Cup, then watch the rest of this video. Please like and comment on the video below. That will allow me to produce better quality videos and more of them in the future. If you're interested in learning to trade successfully on sports, then why not visit the BetAngel Academy, where we have more detailed videos. So it's the Ryder Cup, and the Ryder Cup is very different from other golf tournaments in that all of the majors actually that you see are stroke play tournaments. So this basically means that the players have to, over the course of 4 days, have to get round the course in the fewest number of strokes possible. And that's how most golf tournaments are played out. If you're not into golf, most of the stuff that you see televised would have been a stroke play tournament, as they say in golfing terms. Whereas where the Ryder Cup is different is it's a match play tournament. So a match play tournament is where on each individual game that takes place, you're battling to win a hole. How do you win a hole? Well, you basically complete, say we've got a par 4 or a par 5, is probably a better example. You're trying to win that hole against your opponent. You're trying to actually complete that individual hole in less shots than your opponent. If you do, you get awarded a point, but if you both end up getting the same score, then the hole is halved. So in Ryder Cup golf, it's a bit like a football match. You can have Team A winning, Team B, or you can get a tie, as they would say, as opposed to a draw. But basically the point would be halved at that particular point. So when you're playing stroke play golf, you're playing over the course of 18 holes, typically on a major over 4 days. You're trying to get the lowest score possible over those 4 days. But when you're playing match play golf, it's all about getting the lowest score on one individual hole. If you do that, you get awarded a point, but if you get the same score as your opponent, you get a half. And on the Ryder Cup, those points are allocated between European players and American players. So the Ryder Cup is different also in terms of, in the golf world, you do have match play tournaments. There are match play tournaments that take place all of the time. So the players set off, they go round the course, and they're looking to win holes against each other. And then basically they will continue that until it's impossible for one player to win, or perhaps they could actually end up halved overall, and then the match will continue until we find a winner. So yeah, you know, the concept's very different, and therefore the style of play is very different. Probably the best way for me to sort of paraphrase this is it's a sort of a T20 for golf, effectively. It makes golf a bit more exciting because you have to go for the shots. So as you're going round the course, you know, you may end up in a situation where you just sort of think, well, you know what, I can't win this hole, so I'll just give it to my opponent. And very often what you'll see is on the putting green at a match play tournament, you may actually find somebody conceding a hole because somebody's landed the ball this far, they're already a shot behind, and it's pretty obvious they're going to get the putt definitely in one and at least in two, so they may just give it away. So you may not see people putting out at the Ryder Cup simply because they've definitely won or lost a hole, and they may just concede it. So yeah, it's very different, but also think about the way that the tournament is played. When you play a major and you're playing a stroke play tournament, what's happening is you're trying not to make mistakes. You're trying to get round in making the fewest number of mistakes and hopefully picking up a shot here or there. It's sort of like the test match equivalent of cricket. So, you know, you're defending most of the time and you're playing defensively, whereas in the Ryder Cup and in stroke play tournaments, there's a huge incentive to go for a shot. So say, you know, you're a hole down at some point and there's not many holes left, then you're probably going to try a few of those trickier shots or do something a bit special in order to try and pick up a point or two. And also throw into the mix as well that what we're doing here is we're playing Europe via the USA, and each one of those individual matches can contribute to the score. So one of the characteristics of the Ryder Cup is that messages are flying backwards and forwards and just saying, look, we've lost this particular competition, you need to go for it and try and get this point. So that really livens things up in terms of the activity that you see, not only in the golf match itself, but in the underlying market that you're likely to trade on Betfair or any other betting exchange. It's very different from your traditional stroke play tournament. So where the Ryder Cup is different as well is that in traditional match play tournaments, they'll be player against player going off to try and win their individual match by winning as many holes as they can against their opponent. But in the Ryder Cup, you actually have different formats mixed up within there as well. So they set up two different teams, and then those teams can play. It may be that a player doesn't play in the first part of the tournament but plays in the singles a bit later on. But basically you'll have different formats within the Ryder Cup as well. So you get the foursomes, which is basically where 2 players from each team go together in a group of 4, hence the name. But what they actually do is they hit alternative shots. So basically one player will go up and tee off, and then on the fairway the other player will play the next shot, and that happens on both teams. So they alternate. So basically if your colleague gets you in trouble, you're going to have to dig yourself out of that trouble, and vice versa. But basically you end up playing alternative shots throughout the rest of that particular match. Now you also have the 4-ball as well, which again, as the name suggests, are 4 players. But basically you have your own individual ball, you play that particular hole, and then the person that gets the best score is the one that goes up against the opponents. So it's a slightly more forgiving format. Rather than having to hit your opponent's ball and you don't know what's going to happen, you could have an absolute shocker, but your colleague within the same team has a blinder, and it's his score that will count towards that particular hole. So yeah, those two are very different from what you would have seen in traditional golf, and it makes it a bit more exciting and a bit more variable as well. And then typically on the last day you have the singles, which is where the players play against each other, and the captains of each team will strategically select players to go against other players on the other side, and then they just go head to head basically to try and win their individual matches. And they could win their individual match, or they could actually half it. But basically what you'll tend to find on that last day in the singles is where the overall tournament is won or lost. But it can also throw up some unusual things as well. So do you throw in a really, really good player against another really good player, or do you sort of mismatch it and strategically try and win points at certain parts of the day on certain parts of the course? So yeah, you get 3 different formats of match play in the Ryder Cup. So how does the market trade overall? What are the characteristics of the market, and what should we be looking to do when we're actively trading the Ryder Cup? Overall, we would expect the volume to probably, I would estimate it to be around 12 million across all those markets. It's going to be somewhere between 10 and 15 is my feel for the sort of liquidity that we should see, or the total matched volume. As I've said, volume is not liquidity in previous videos. So total match volume, 10 to 15 million. Probably around 2/3 of that, somewhere between half and 2/3 will go on the outright winner market. So you can bet or trade Europe, the USA, or the tie. So think of the tie like the draw in a football match. If one team starts to pull away from the other, then obviously the price is going to drift. But if it gets very tight, then maybe you'll see the price of the tie, the draw, start to come in a little. So those are the 3 predominant options, and that's quite a big trading market. That is the biggest trading market. Below that, however, you get the match odds market, which will be the 4-balls, the foursomes, or the singles, where you have Group A against Group B and the tie, or a hole to be halved. And those generate a lot of liquidity as well. So they will generate probably 4 to 5 million over the course of the tournament. And then you look at all of the other small markets, they account for loads of little bits here and there. But predominantly, it will be the outright winner market and the individual match markets that account for the bulk of the liquidity that is going to be traded during the Ryder Cup. So if we look at the individual sections, you've got the foursomes, the 4-balls, and the singles. Interestingly enough, although maybe not surprisingly, they all trade similar amounts of money. At the last couple of Ryder Cups, you're looking at about $1.5 million per those individual groupings. So despite the fact that there are more players per group in the 4-balls and the foursomes, they overall trade about the same in total as you'd expect on the singles. So what that's telling you is that in the individual singles matches will be slightly lower liquidity than the 4-balls and the foursomes. But also think about the way that individual matches play out. So it's not impossible that if you're looking at a singles match, that one player may be dominant against another. And therefore, what you'll probably find is that when we look at the singles matches, you may have the odd match where the winner is known fairly quickly, and therefore nothing really happens within the market. However, if you look at the 4-balls, that tends to be the most varied. That tends to be where a player going for a particular shot is much more likely, and therefore him getting that shot and shifting the odds dramatically introduces the most amount of variability. So, you know, typically I quite like the four balls, because if you look at historical data, I went through the last 3 Ryder Cups, and we're looking at the sort of late 80s, sort of early 90s on some occasions, of matches where more than 2 selections traded below odds on. So basically what that's saying to you is when a team gets into the lead, it probably makes sense to lay them at low odds in the anticipation that the other team will come back into the match at some point. That works particularly well on 4 balls. The average price of a team trading heavier than odds on but not going on to win was about 1.6, and that occurred very frequently when we're looking at the 4 balls. If we look at the foursomes, that's a little bit lower because the structure of the foursomes is different and they have different incentives to score there. And therefore it becomes slightly less variable, but still you're looking at about sort of 70s, mid-70s of participants in that market trading at odds on. And when they do trade at odds on, they'll probably be a little bit lower because it will be more certain. So yeah, the foursomes, you're looking at mid-70s in terms of opponents trading odds on, and they're going to reach a slightly shorter price when that occurs because it's likely to be more certain. And at the bottom of the list we get to the singles on the last day, because we're talking about the group effort of singles. We're not talking about strategic play here. They're just trying to win. So as a consequence, you're about 2/3 of those will trade odds on and still go on to lose. But the price at which that occurs will be a little bit lower. So can you see there's a sort of gradual sliding scale in terms of the chance of players or matches trading odds on and the price at which they reach, because it's going to be more certain, for example, in the singles, that a player will take the lead and manage to hold on to it. But look at the incentive on each of these. The incentive to score or to try and go for an amazing shot varies across individual markets and individual groupings. So when you look at the singles, you know, if a player is desperately in trouble, then he could lose the hole, or he may just go for a wild shot, and you never know. He may just bag that eagle, or perhaps even an albatross or something, by playing that crazy shot. If he's got nothing to lose and he's about to lose the hole, why not go for it? But when you look back up and you look at, for example, the 4 balls, you may find that there's a little bit of cooperation in terms of the way that players are likely to play, given how they've played their first couple of shots and so on. So yeah, overall what you'll tend to find is the match odds markets produce some great trading opportunities. They've got reasonable amounts of liquidity, and you'll very often see some quite variable outcomes on those individual matches. So yeah, there's an overall view of the Ryder Cup, sort of volumes that it trades, and the sort of way that you should trade it. I'll be looking at the overall market and trying to make a decision on what happens there, but the individual markets are very often where most of the opportunity is created, and when you see those going odds on, then you'll probably find that it's going to be a reasonable chance of success if you start going against those odds on shots, especially if it's slightly earlier in the round. Anyhow, there's loads of information there for you to get on with the Ryder Cup. I'm going to enjoy watching it, hope you do too, and hope you get a couple of decent trades out of that tournament.